is close to uptown, close to our jobs. It's not 45 minutes away, right? That's all about travel time. It's all about the time it takes for you to get somewhere. If we've got bus rapid transit to Gastonia, you could live in Gastonia and that would be considered affordable housing for Charlotte, right? So combining the two could be really powerful. So I'm a big proponent of public transportation. And it's good for the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that just teens and activists can become a proponent of when changing the social culture of taking the bus or social public transportation. I mean, I've done it before. I thought it was fun. So just like kind of spreading the word and getting people to take it, definitely a good idea, especially among high schoolers.
Yeah. But you gotta know it's gonna come on time. You need to be able to look at your phone and pull up your app. Go, oh, the bus is coming in 12 minutes. I'm going to sit here until 2 minutes before, however long it takes you to get to the bus stop, and I'm going to pay for my ticket online. You know, it's got to be predictable and efficient.
Yes, absolutely. So our next question. So during the past 2 months, 2 to 3 months, a lot of people have seen a social awakening in themselves. So how has this gone for you? Have you done any protesting, rallying, donating, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is different for everyone. I have attended protests. I'm not myself a protester really, and that's because I'm about advocacy. And when, as I mentioned, when I had my experience, for me, I decided I was going to work on policy. And at the end of the day, it takes all types. Protesting gets the message out. It's powerful. It really identifies what the needs are, but it's not for everyone. That doesn't mean that you're any less, you feel any less passionate about it. It's about dedicating yourself to understanding the problems, first of all, and then being committed to making the change. For me, what I've seen is a constant repeat of systemic problems, of a system that just will it's like muscle memory, you know, it keeps repeating itself unless you really break down that memory and interrupt it. And so protesting is interrupting. And that's all part of the system. But then you got to have people who are willing to work on the problem of changing it.
Exactly. Which is why you're doing your part and we're doing ours on the streets. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'll pass it to Alexis.
Yes. So my next question is, what is the city council doing to address the issues, that we're seeing of homelessness and human trafficking in Charlotte?
So human trafficking is I'll take that one first because it is a little bit more difficult because it generally involves interstate crime. And interstate crime is really handled by the district attorney's office. We don't have, if the police can catch it, then they do, and they work closely with nonprofit agencies that help sex trafficking victims get away from their abuser or their tormentor, their boss, whatever. But as a council, there's not a whole lot that we can do with that. We can't set policies because, again, it's a federal issue. What was the other halves? Trafficking and
homelessness.
So for homelessness, so the city council builds affordable housing. We rely on the partnership with the county to provide those services. So every 2 years, when it's not an election year, like right now, this isn't, we're not up for election right now. We will be next year. But we put bonds on the ballot. And one of the bonds is a housing bond. And that's the money that goes into the housing trust fund to build. So bonds provide capital, not operating expenses, capital. And it used to be for years and years that we would spend $15 million every 2 years to build affordable housing. And what we know is that we could never catch up, and we probably won't ever catch up. But 2 years ago, we more than tripled that bond, and now it's $50 million. And that provides the money for more or less 2,000 units of housing. But that's not just, the hardest thing to do is to build new housing, because even from the day you approve that money, it's going to take a couple of years to get it built. What we prefer to do is find what we call NOAHs, naturally occurring affordable housing, and renovate that. It's cheaper, but we can go to an apartment owner and say, we will give you money to fix your roof or the siding or clean up mold, whatever it is, if you agree to keep your rents restricted to a certain level for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. That's been a huge help. Our money goes a lot further. But then you get down to the chronic homelessness. And that's where we partner with the A Roof Above, which is the merger of Urban Ministries and the Men's Shelter. And we partner with Salvation Army. They know how to provide services and shelter to the chronically homeless. And a lot of the people, but not all of them, in fact, not the majority of them, are chronically homeless that you see at Tent City and that kind of thing. And those folks, we just approved $3 million to purchase a hotel that Room Above is purchasing. We don't purchase it. And they're gonna convert those hotel rooms to single resident occupancy rooms. And they're nice, a local architect's designing them. But they're also building a building onto that hotel that will provide the wraparound services, the client services that those folks need. So the homelessness, if you've got families, and I'm a room in the inn volunteer, I have been for 7 years, and a lot of who we see come through are families that are temporarily homeless. And if we can get them into a shelter or get a roof above their head, then we can start helping them with whatever it was that caused them to become homeless. So it's not an easy fix. The other part of that problem, frankly, is that you've got towns that drive people to Charlotte and leave them here. And I saw that last winter at my church where I volunteer for Room in the Inn. We had a young family who the police department brought them in from Rock Hill and dropped them off because they don't have the services there that we do. And so when you provide those services, sometimes you do attract people from the surrounding areas that are going to come here because of the services. So it's a really tough problem to solve.
Based on the policies that you guys are implementing now, do you expect to see a change in the amount of homeless people in the next few years?
Yeah. More. I'm guessing we'll see more because of COVID. When right now we're under a moratorium for evictions. And that means that landlords can't kick people out of their apartments. So the big question is, why then do we see so many more homeless people? And we don't really know if they're coming from other towns, because we do have a tremendous network of volunteers who are feeding folks, providing them with blankets and sleeping bags. And that happens in most big cities. But I think that when you have a city that is prosperous and successful, and you see this in San Francisco, Seattle, the higher the wages are, the more expensive housing gets, because there's more people there that can afford it and are looking for it. And so you're leaving more people behind. So a huge component of this is that we have got to be attracting jobs at all levels. And it's really hard to get people's attention on that. Warehousing jobs, for example. I've been talking about this for a few years and nobody's really interested. Logistics and distribution is one of the highest wage growth industries there is. And you can start in a job in warehouse without a college degree and move into management. But we just don't embrace that as an industry that says, let's attract that here, right? It's not sexy enough, like IT and, fintech and all this stuff. But I think we focus sometimes on the very high end jobs, which absolutely it creates more restaurants and more choices and more this and that. But we got to have jobs at lower levels of the spectrum for other folks to be able to put a roof over their head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know part of that is just the culture of Charlotte. It's big, flashy, and rich. So
We're a banking city, and that's generally high paying jobs. The banking community built this city, there's no doubt. And that's not a bad thing, but we government leaders have to be aware of that you can't have just all those jobs on one end of the spectrum.
absolutely, yeah. So our next question, what are your plans for shrinking Charlotte's carbon footprint and relying less on fossil fuels and harmful energy sources?
Getting people out of their cars and trying to get them to ride the bus and the light rail. That's the biggest contributor. So for me, I think it's not even that, well, it is that the car is the contributor, but sitting in traffic is a huge contributor. That's not feel good language. That really is very, very real. We got to get people out of their cars and into modern public transportation. We need to have sidewalks that, connect to bus stops. We need to have sidewalks that connect to where you want to go. We're planning our city so that there are what we call activity centers close to everybody so that you can walk to the store, you can, walk to services, bike ride, providing bike lanes. That it sounds like feel good stuff, but that's a big contributor to lowering our carbon footprint.
Absolutely. I will pass it to Alexis next.
Just on the account, like my question, just on the account of, clean energy and just making sure that the city is clean and getting people out of their cars. I know that I've seen a couple of clean buses, like, when I'm, downtown, or some even come up to where I live. I've seen some clean buses, but what is exactly the city's plan, to make buses energy efficient?
So that's a great question and dilemma, Alexis, because a city bus that is a hybrid, so not even, let's just say we never buy diesel again. A diesel bus is about $300,000. A hybrid's about $500,000, and an electric is $1 million. Plus, you have to make sure you have the charging stations. And for a bus in Charlotte, you can't plug it in overnight. You need the quick charge stations that charge in. It looks like a big car wash, right? You drive under it, and it charges it in like 20 minutes. The challenge that we have is if you say we have $30 million to spend, let's say, would you spend that all on new electric buses and only have half the buses you need? Or would you spend that on more buses so that you can get our average bus trip right now is 90 minutes. And if we spent that 30 million on buses now, you could get that down to 45 million minutes. And so more people would ride the bus because it's more efficient. And so you really have to make a choice. Should you spend your money on electric vehicles now, or should you spend it on hybrid vehicles that maybe aren't as energy efficient, but it will encourage more people to ride the bus? So I kind of just slipped out what my preference is. But that's a conversation that everybody should have, because right now only 6% of the public rides public transportation. And my bet is that if you talk to most people that ride the bus on a regular basis, they're not doing it because it's clean energy. They're doing it because they don't have a choice. And so to change the culture, to get people to use the bus, get them out of traffic congestion and out of their cars, we first need an efficient bus system, I think.
All right.
But we are electric buses too. We're blending them in. Like our airport buses now are all going to be electric.
Oh, that's definitely something that's really nice to see. It's definitely.
Yeah, we bought 6 electric buses for the airport because they're shorter distance and you can take them out of the rotation more to be able to charge them.
Very nice. Very nice. I didn't know a lot of that, so thank you. Have you seen any change recently caused by the steps of youth activists and state leaders in their system?
In our system, um, yeah, I mean, I think it, if you look at the clean energy movement, when Greta Thunberg was here, what's her name? I'm saying that wrong. Greta Thunberg.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple activist groups at Myers Park High School. I thought Ardrey Kell had some students that came as well, and we were all out there. It was pretty much students, and we were out there listening. And I think it's important. I don't see students a lot outside of the space of clean energy, but I think it's important because the stuff that we're doing right now and the approvals that we put in place now are really long-term projects. And it's going to be for you guys. If you come back, if you do whatever you do in your life and come back to Charlotte. So my kids are 21, 23, and 25. And I always say that what we do now, and none of them live here. So I'm hoping that what we do now builds a city that they want to move back to and raise their family in, because I'm really selfish and I want my grandkids to live here. So so it is, I do think about it all the time, but that's why we need your voices, because it's all going to be for you. It's all about you, really. And what's the kind of city that you want to live in? We need to know that.
Yeah, thank you.
How many of you have your driver's license? Most of you guys don't have your cameras on, but if you, I hear a lot that a lot of younger people don't want to get their driver's license, or not in a big hurry to get their license. That's a game changer. If that's the case, then you guys really should be pushing for a good public transportation system, so you don't have to own a car. In North Carolina, the cost of owning a car annually is about $7,000. That's a lot of, that's a lot of money. That's assuming you don't have a car accident.
No, yeah. Our generation is very curious. We'll go to the protest in a minute, but none of us want to take our driver's test. So that's definitely something we can focus on. Yeah. I'll pass it to Alexis.
Yeah, I know in my experience, I would much rather take the bus, to get where I want to go, but I'm getting my license soon, just out of obligation. So my next question is, do you support the Green New Deal?
I can honestly say I haven't read the whole thing. I think that you always have to have a balance. You can't flip a switch. I applaud AOC for pushing it, right? And Bernie Sanders, because Bernie was willing to push it knowing that he might not get elected. But he feels so strongly about it. And that's what moves the needle. Last time he ran, there were fewer people who believed in it. And he keeps saying the same thing. And I think there's more people saying, there's something to that. So I haven't read the whole thing. I do think that young people should push for it, because this isn't going to impact me. It's going to impact you guys. And it's going to be what we leave for you. So the decisions we are making today are going to have a very strong impact on you all. So push for it. Doesn't really matter what I think. It's you guys are the ones that it's going to benefit the most.
Definitely. I definitely agree.
Absolutely. Thank you. So in the midst of COVID-19 and again, the Black Lives Matter movement, we have seen, honestly, over the past 4 years, an increase in hate crimes just everywhere, but especially towards Asian Americans. And so has the city council done anything to prevent these hate crimes, or is there anything you would like to implement to try and stop these kind of crimes?
We have, I think that our hate crimes our felony law, there's felony federal laws that have the most impact on hate crimes. I think what our role is and what we have done is we started the Department of Immigrant Affairs, Equity. I just told the person who runs this today, it's too long of a name, but it's basically the Department of Equity, Diversity, and Immigrant Affairs. And the purpose of it is to build relationships within those communities so that that people, whether you're LGBT, whether you're an immigrant, whether you're in a group that feels disenfranchised from the laws or the protection of this community, have a place to go and ask for help. And so after the whole the awful things that we saw at the border with the president administration and putting children in cages, even though we can't impact that, we needed the immigrant community to know that our police department is not working with ICE, that we are not we don't call ourselves a sanctuary city because we don't have to. You can say whatever you want, but if somebody trusts you or doesn't trust you, that's really the most important thing. And so we started this, and we went and we had conversations set up throughout the community in Spanish, in other languages, to build trust, to say, and with police officers to say, we are not going to turn you in. We are not working with ICE, with whatever their agenda is. And that's important because, for example, in East Charlotte, in the Hispanic community, where a lot of Hispanic workers carry cash because they get paid cash, maybe they're not legal and they can't have a bank account. As a city, our goal is not to find those people and arrest them. Our goal is to make sure that they feel like they can come to city officials or the police and report crimes, report where it's happening, report domestic abuse, which is a big problem. And our police department wants to solve that problem, not whether or not somebody is documented. So building that trust, first and foremost, is the most important thing. You can pass whatever you want. It's not enforceable it's not effective if people don't feel like there is a sense of trust with those in authority.
Absolutely. And I don't think that's something that the city council really has a lot of attention on, just overall. It's not something you hear about the city council, even though it definitely should be, because people want to hear it. People want to hear that their government cares about people who are coming in. They're not working with ICE. So yeah, it's fantastic. I will pass it to Alexis.
Okay, my question is kind of a two-part question. So what changes have you seen in the economic welfare of marginalized communities in Charlotte as a result of COVID-19? And what has the city council been doing, to uplift the stories and experiences of those in communities who have been affected most?
So know that nationally, and I think this is what you're kind of alluding to, Alexis, that what was the phrase give me the phrase that you used again in terms of who you're talking about in particular? Disenfranchised?
Yeah, the economic welfare of marginalized communities.
Marginalized
communities, low income.
Yeah. So we know that they've been disproportionately affected, and they have throughout the country. And so as an example, when we received our share of the Federal CARES Act money, I went to the mayor and said, we need to put a group together to focus on small businesses, and in particular minority businesses. But the federal government said you can't use that money to favor a minority group or a marginalized group. And so we got pretty creative about it, if I may say so. What we did was, so there were a couple things. So what we know is that Black-owned business owners traditionally and culturally have borrowed money from their friends and families to start their businesses, because of the history of wealth creation in this country that left out Black populations through redlining. A lot of people accumulate wealth with homes, and white people have had generations head start in building wealth and passing it on to their children, and therefore having funds to be able to start a business and do something like that. And because of that generational impact, a lot of Black entrepreneurs didn't have funding to start a business, and so they would borrow it from each other. Well, fast forward with things like the CARES Act, and we start a program to say, we're going to give you money to help your business get through this pandemic. You can't say, we're going to do a credit check. We want to see what your bank relationship is, because some people don't even have a bank relationship. And it was a huge learning curve. We put aside $50 million to help small businesses, and we thought it would be a little bit easier. But what we learned is a lot of those businesses don't have those banking relationships, couldn't fill out the paperwork we asked for. And so we made it as simple as possible, and we gave as much notice as possible so that minority businesses would have all their paperwork in line. And we had what we called ambassadors set up at the YMCAs and different places, so that if you owned a bakery and you wanted help to be ready to apply for those grants, you could come to that location and they'd help you fill out all the forms so that when the grant opened, you were ready to go. And because of that, the majority of our small business grants did go to minority business owners, because we're not discriminating per the federal guidelines, but we made sure that people that are traditionally left out were in line and had a fair shot at getting that funding. The other thing we did was we heard from the Latin American Coalition that a lot of international business owners, restaurant owners, could not apply for PPP, the federal CARES Act money themselves, because they're not citizens. That was a federal regulation. And if you came from Mexico and you're here on a permanent visa, you could own a restaurant and have what's called a W-7. And that basically gives the federal government the right to tax you and get taxes, but you're not a citizen. And a lot of people don't really know that. And so that just seems really wrong, that you can't get those kind of benefits when the government's quite happy to take your taxes. And so we worked with the Latin American Coalition on a program that served two purposes. One, we gave the money to the coalition, and they made grants to international restaurants, a lot of Hispanic restaurants and other Ethiopian restaurants and different restaurants that were feeding the immigrant community, because those were also families that if you were getting free meals from CMS, for instance, and you don't have a car, you couldn't go there and get your free meal. So they were being left out of that process, or they're afraid to go to a food bank because of ICE, but they're not afraid to go to their neighborhood Somalian restaurant. And so we provided the funding to those chambers that provided it to those restaurants, and they were cooking family packs of meals for free. And they're getting the money from us, but they're providing it for free. So it was kind of serving two different purposes. So those are a couple of the things that we did. We worked with the refugee center to make sure that refugee business owners understood that they could apply, get translator services if folks didn't understand how to apply for it. And we worked with a lot of different agencies to try to give people a leg up and the help that they needed so that they were ready to be able to apply for those grants. And they're not loans. They don't have to pay them back.
That's honestly an incredible opportunity. I honestly didn't know about that, going on in the community. So it was great to hear about it. I actually have a quick follow-up question, just about, regarding COVID-19 and, money. How do you think the city will fare? Like, how do you think the city will, be able to run efficiently in the wake of COVID, involving money in the CARES Act?
So Charlotte is in good shape. I know cities, because as Mayor Pro Tem, I'm in different sort of groups of mayor pro tems across the country of large cities. And there's cities that are going to have to cut their budgets by 20%. We're not cutting our budget this year. We got pretty lucky with our CARES Act allocation. And we were able to cover, you can't cover lost revenue, but we were able to cover things in a different way. We're a pretty conservative city, and that sounds conservative from a financial standpoint. And that in good times, people might think that that means we're not trying hard enough. But the reason it matters is because in bad times, we're not overextended. We can still pay our debt. You know, we're still going to be able to pay our debt. We might not be able to add things to the list that we would really like to do, like add more buses, but we're in pretty good shape. So we don't anticipate we're going to have a tax increase this next year.
Yeah, that's definitely good to hear. You know, we talked to a couple of other people, and, you know, they're talking about how it wouldn't go so well, whether that was at, you know, the state level or anything like that. So it's definitely good to hear that Charlotte's in good shape, at least.
Our business, it's not to say though that we understand our businesses are hurting, and a lot of people are hurting. But personally at the city level, we have been able to use some of our CARES Act money for our schools. We gave $1 million to CMS Foundation for the internet connectivity, understanding that there's a lot of kids, and I got an email from 2 school board members today who are friends of mine saying they're still finding kids in partnership with Our Bridge, which works with Hispanic kids. They gave them a list of children that still are not connected to their classes and haven't been probably since last March. So, you know, we provided funding for the internet service for hotspots to go home, and we've provided money for the YMCA's for after school care. And there's about $250,000 set aside for the quote digital divide. We don't know what that means yet, but we just want to set it aside to see what kind of a community partnership comes forward and what those needs are.
Actually, our next question kind of goes off of that. So as I'm sure you're aware, we will be heading back to school in January. And this has been kind of a controversial decision made by the school board. How do you feel about the decision sending our kids back to school?
It's tough. It's tough. I think that you guys really got a raw deal. I don't know how you would have solved it. My daughter's still in college, so she thinks it stinks. You know, she goes to UVA, and the rule is you can't be with more than 5 people or you get suspended. So like her whole house couldn't, there's 8 girls in her house. They couldn't even go out to eat dinner together or they could get suspended. So it's just a raw deal, honestly. And I don't know that there's a great answer. I'd love to see you guys back in school. And I think that we as a community need to all come together to make sure that whatever the schools need, they get it. You know, I mean, I remember at Myers Park High School, the mold in the HVAC system, you know, and that's not the school board's fault. That's the state's fault for not providing the money to pay for that. You know, I mean, you guys know, well, Ardrey Kell's in pretty good shape, but there's some high schools that aren't. And, you know, you can't just, in my daughter's, I remember her freshman English class was like 40 kids in a trailer. Yeah, now that's a petri dish right now. Okay, that's not an English class. She had she got a lot out from the teacher, but that's not a healthy situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just hard. I mean, this is the first time we've had to deal with this. There wasn't really, there's not really a set way to do it. So, and that's something that we keep hearing is that our school board and Board of Education is just underfunded and they need more money that the state is not giving them. So yeah, it's terrible. Alexis, I'll pass it to you.
The next question is, you know, on to lighter things. Do you have any plans to run for mayor in the future, possibly?
I've got a year left on this term, and it's been a hard term. It's been really hard. And so I'm not committing to anything. I'm committing to do a good job my last year. Um, and see where it goes. I'm very much about the universe has a plan, and I'm okay with finding out what that is. The guy who tried to abduct me was all part of my plan. I don't look at that and say, oh my God, I can't believe, I mean, it just is what it is. I was safe. I got out okay. From years of working in Russia, in Latin America, I have you know, something kicked in, but I look back at it and say that was part of my plan. It really kicked me in the butt and said, get out of your little bubble and figure out what's going on in the whole city. And I did. And, I thought, wow, there's neighborhoods that people have. I had a town hall meeting on development, and two ladies came and they sat there the whole time. They never said a thing while people in South Park were arguing about all their traffic and blah, blah, blah. And afterwards I said, you two haven't said anything. Did you want to share something, or is there something that we didn't talk about? And they pulled out boxes of cereal from their house. It was mother and daughter, and with bullet holes through it. And they said, we have to rearrange our furniture for when the bullets come through the windows. That's really, just, it took my breath away. And I thought those are the kind of conversations that we as a community have to give each other some grace to hear that, and to be a part of solving that, and to not, judge others about stupid topics that everybody seems to be talking about these days. But we have to, be open to hearing more about how COVID affects people, how violence affects people, how public safety affects people. And you're always going to learn something. And it's, me as a white person, I probably have more, I know I have more to learn and have had to. And I just enjoy being vulnerable in a place that allows me to learn, in a space that allows me to learn. But we all have something to learn. And I can guarantee you that if you spend the time doing it, there's a lot of good that comes from it too, that makes you feel like your life is a little bit richer for having done it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your response. You hit on something that is very important to a lot of us in this conversation right now. And it's why we called ourselves the Ballantine Youth Activists. If you stayed in Ballantine, you would know none of this stuff ever happened. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I moved here a year ago, and it was like a parallel universe. It's insane. So I agree. We have to sit at those tables and hear those who are not used to being heard, and find a way to get ourselves to that place, or else nothing is ever going to change for them when it's our job to say something. So Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of classmates that, and you're in a place that you have the gift of being able to share with them in a certain way what other people's experiences are, because you've leaned in and you've heard what other people have to say, and you can help them understand and see that. But if people don't have the opportunity to hear it, they're never going to learn, and ask questions, and nothing's ever going to change.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you. And we are going to start wrapping it up in a few minutes. But before that, we want to ask a few questions about what it's like for you as Mayor Pro Tem. So what is it like to be a woman in politics?
Well, I think it's easier than being a woman in the business world, honestly. There's a lot of momentum behind getting women elected. I personally don't feel at all like being a woman in politics is a negative. I think it's harder at the federal level because it's kind of dominated by old white guys. Well, not kind of, it is dominated by old white guys. That's not true at the local level. It can, look at the school board. It's 8 women and 1 man. my first term, the city council was more women than men. And then it flip flops, based on who gets elected. Now it's kind of balanced, but I feel like, I was a banker in Texas in the 80s, and that was and probably still is very male dominated. And it just, that's what it was. I didn't really know any different. You were sort of taught to be like a man, and act like that. But I just think, my own philosophy is, if you can't go right through it, go around it and figure out a way to do it. And I certainly had examples of some very sort of chauvinistic activity that I could have fought, or I could have said, well, I'm going to move around it and get what I want. And there's a lot of men who recognize it and will help you, so I think elected office, honestly, at the local level is not, I don't believe it's harder for women. I think it's harder in the sense that if a woman is a caregiver, primary caregiver at home, it's really hard to serve. My husband traveled Monday through Thursday, and I couldn't have done that when my kids were little. So I ran for office when my daughter was a sophomore in high school. My son was a senior. My other son was in college. And that's the first time I ran. And, they basically ate at Panera a lot by themselves. But they understood it, they got it. And I tried to be home by 8:30 at night, but I'm out every night. So I would say that's the hard part, because still traditionally women are the ones that are more of the caregivers. And if you have a spouse that honors that and respects that, like I do, my husband, when he was home, was always willing to jump in and take over so that I could be successful. And he still is that way. He's happy now to do whatever he can to support me. So I feel lucky in that sense.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I know that a lot of people on this call, they plan on going into politics or something like that. So it's great to hear a positive perspective on it. And what you said, a lot of it is just due to changing the culture around it. Like you can be a caregiver and do things in politics. It doesn't disqualify you from doing something important. So
yeah,
thank you. I'll pass it to Alexis, and then we will wrap up.
So my final question is just, looking at all the things that we're doing now in a broader aspect, how do you think, activism in general and the times that we're going through and youth activism will impact the future?
Well, I think we're in a real moment of change. Don't give up on it. I still know people that were involved in the 2016 protests when Keith Lamont Scott died and Justin Carr was shot. And I know people that were like Greg Jackson with Heal Charlotte. If you guys are familiar with Heal Charlotte, Greg was a protester, and he encountered a captain, and the captain said, again, you're either part of the problem, part of the solution. Which one do you want to be? And Greg said, I want to be part of the solution. And he's one of the few that I know from that time. I was in office at that time, and he's one of the few that still stuck with it. So, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're not going to get change overnight. Nothing is done in a straight line, or it would have been done already. So don't give up on it. Find people that will help you, ask for help. What I didn't have any experience in politics when I went through my incident, and I Googled the city council and, tried to figure out who the police report to, found out it was the city council, and Anthony Fox and Andy Doolin emailed me back that night. And, Anthony Fox went on to be mayor and secretary of transportation. Andy was a Republican city council member, and it doesn't matter, good people are good people. And they both said, we'll help you hold us accountable, and take people up on that help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And especially do not be afraid to say, I don't know, but help me understand, because that's really powerful. You'd be surprised how many people want to see you succeed and want to see you do well. If they don't, they don't, but there's enough out there that will that will offer you help. And if they don't answer you the first time, don't take that as an affront. I tell my kids that when they're networking for work and jobs. It's just that most people are so busy. If they're in a place of authority, place of power, they might miss that email. I'm the worst at emails. It takes me about a week to get back. I mean, but I get back, I answer them, but it's because it's important to me, but I might not answer it right away. Don't take that as a no from people if you don't hear from them right away.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely very encouraging. Just finding I don't want to say will, but the will to keep fighting for what we believe in. So thank you. And last of all, do you have anything that you would like to add? Any, I don't know, election volunteers that you may need, things like that?
So, well, I'm not up for election this year, so I think we're all hands on deck right now trying to get people elected. I would say, especially once the election's over, I think we're all focused on that right now. But you guys can certainly be poll watchers. If you want to email me, I have the links for being a poll watcher or, working, and that's working to make sure votes aren't tossed out, that kind of thing. That is, aside from that, yeah, if you need candidates if you want to support candidates, I'm happy to connect you with anybody. But after the election, I would say, pay attention to what's going on. No, if you stay in Charlotte, if you go to your whatever town your college is in, or wherever you're planning on working, pay attention. Go to the public forums at your city council or your county commission and speak up. If you guys were to come down and say, what you're doing around clean energy is important to us, what you're doing around buses is important to us, what you're doing for parks and open space is important, educate yourselves and then go down and speak. Just because you're a student doesn't mean people won't listen. They will. Now, if you're doing it for your senior project, that kind of comes through a little bit, but we figure that out quickly. But if you're doing it because you're passionate about it and you're authentic about it, people will listen. It makes a difference.
It does. Thank you so much. And to everyone on the call, we do have volunteer information on our website if you do want to get involved. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Eislet, for being here today. You were amazing, and it was such a pleasure having you here. And with that, we will wrap up the call. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.